It's hard to imagine that now because we're so far removed from it that it's almost hard to just that I want to be number one. Little did I know that I would,
Martina Navratilova just said what the entire tennis world has been thinking, and the fact that an 18-time Grand Slam champion felt the need to say it out loud with that level of urgency, unprompted, ahead of an entirely different tournament, tells you the Dubai run genuinely stunned people who have seen everything this sport has to offer. Just days ago, Navratilova sat down with WTA.com on March 2nd, 2026 ahead of Indian Wells in Miami.
100%. I think sports has always been on the front of social change and social progress.
When Eala's name came up, the response was immediate, crafty. A lefty who uses variety in ways most players her age simply cannot. Smart, but the serve needs strengthening, and the build needs work if she's going to hold her ground against the very best. This interview landed 2 weeks after Eala walked onto center court in Dubai, ranked 47th in the world, beat a top 10 player in a tiebreak thriller, and turned a 5,000 capacity stadium into what felt like a national celebration for an entire country. All within 24 hours that nobody in tennis saw coming. Subscribe now. Because the full story behind Navratilova's reaction makes a lot more sense once you see what actually happened in Dubai. Here is exactly what happened and why it matters. To understand why Navratilova's reaction carried the weight it did, you need to go back 1 month before Dubai, back to Melbourne Park in January 2026.
Hindi ko pa mapaniwala. Maraming salamat sa suporta. Sana patuloy yung support.
Where the Australian Open was recording a single-day attendance high of 101,696 spectators, and where the loudest, most chaotic scene of the entire fortnight had nothing to do with the main show courts. It was happening on Court 6. Alex Eala was scheduled there for her first-round match against American Alicia Parks. What greeted her was not a standard tour-level crowd. Fans overflowed the walkways. Queues stretched back for over an hour. Hundreds of Filipino supporters never made it inside at all. The chants of Alex continued long after the match ended. Even after she lost 0-6, 6-3, 6-2, the result barely registered against the spectacle surrounding it. Navratilova and Lindsay Davenport were watching from the Tennis Channel desk. What they saw clearly unsettled them. Davenport said organizers had simply underestimated the situation, that Eala probably needed to be on a bigger show court, that she was probably the most famous female from the Philippines, certainly one of the most famous people to come through their sporting world, and that the crowd chaos was entirely foreseeable. Navratilova went further. She told organizers directly that they needed to keep more in mind where players are from and what their actual fan base looks like. There is a massive Filipino audience in Melbourne and across Australia, she said. Account for it next time you build the schedule. The live stream of Eala's post-match press conference that day drew over 100,000 views, more than Aryna Sabalenka and Carlos Alcaraz on the same day. A player who had just lost in the first round of a Grand Slam was generating more digital engagement than two of the biggest names in the sport. That data point alone should have told the tennis world something significant was building. When the Dubai Duty-Free Tennis Championships came around in February 2026, the scheduling conversation resurfaced immediately. Eala had never played the tournament before. She arrived ranked world number 47, already the highest-ranked Filipino in WTA Tour history, and was placed last on center court for her second-round match against world number 8 Jasmine Paolini on the night of February 17th, the most coveted scheduling slot in the sport, given to a player ranked 47th, and every single person inside that 5,000 capacity stadium understood exactly why. Paolini was not just any top 10 player. She was a former Dubai champion, a 2-time Grand Slam finalist, having reached both the 2024 Roland Garros and Wimbledon finals, and someone with considerably more experience in high-pressure night sessions than a 20-year-old making her tournament debut. On paper, the match had a predictable outcome. On center court that night, it had anything but. Eala took the first set 6-1 in a display that was almost difficult to process given the occasion. She landed 67% of her first serves and won 86% of those points. She did not concede a single break point in the entire set. For a player whose serve has been consistently identified as the weakest part of her game, that opening set was a statement. The second set was a completely different story. Eala built a 5-3 lead and had match points in hand. Paolini, drawing on years of experience in exactly these moments, saved them and fought back to level at 5-5, then broke Eala as she served for the match. The set went to a tiebreak. The first 8 points of that tiebreak all ended in outright winners, a sequence of tennis that had the crowd on its feet before either player had secured anything. Eala eventually closed it out on her 5th match point. When the final ball landed, the stadium erupted in a way that made it feel less like a second-round match at a WTA 1000 event and more like a cup final. Outside in the tennis village, Filipino supporters who had gathered around outdoor screens, surrounded by Philippine flags and signs reading "Laban Alex," which translates to "Fight Alex," were celebrating in the same way. Eala walked to the center of the court and addressed the crowd, switching briefly into Tagalog. She said she had looked up during the tiebreak and thought about how many of them were praying for her to win. She said she had to give everything she had because of it. It was the kind of moment that gets clipped, shared, and watched repeatedly. And within 24 hours, the tennis world was not just talking about the win, it was talking about what the win represented. Within that 24-hour window after the Paolini match, 2 things happened simultaneously. The tennis media began debating whether Eala had already become the sport's biggest draw, regardless of ranking, and tournament organizers walked straight into criticism by moving her to open, rather than close, the center court session for the quarterfinal against Coco Gauff. The concern was specific and legitimate. Filipino fans watching from home face an 11 p.m. local start time for the first match of Dubai's evening session. If Eala opened the night session, they were watching at a reasonable hour. The match following hers, Alina Svitolina against Antonia Ruzic, would then begin well past midnight Manila time. The risk was a half-empty arena for Svitolina, robbed of the crowd energy that Eala's supporters had generated throughout the tournament. It was a scheduling dilemma that had no clean answer, but the debate itself underlined how much a single player's presence had begun reshaping the logistical thinking of a WTA 1000 event. After her round 3 match on the same center court the evening before, Gauff had apologized to the Filipino crowd during her post-match interview for making them wait so long to see their player. The crowd was not hostile toward her, they simply had somewhere else to be emotionally that night. Gauff took it in stride with humor, but the underlying point was impossible to miss. The crowd dynamic at a WTA tournament had been fundamentally altered by one player's presence. The Gauff match on February 19th did not go Eala's way. She lost 6-0, 6-2 in just over an hour, looking fatigued in a way that surprised observers, given she had played only 4 hours and 15 minutes of tennis across her previous matches in the draw. Her serve, the same weapon that had been so reliable against Paolini, fell apart completely. She won 32% of points behind her first serve and 40% behind her second. Against a player of Gauff's quality, those numbers were never going to hold up. Despite the scoreline, Eala exited center court to the same volume of support she had received after every win. Gauff acknowledged it afterwards, saying she knew the crowd was mostly there for Eala, that she had been pretending the cheers were for her just to get through the match, and that she had genuinely found the packed atmosphere helpful even though it was not directed at her. She also said Eala was a tough competitor and that even at 6-0 up, she never felt completely comfortable because she had seen what Eala was capable of. Jessica Pegula, watching from within the tournament, described Eala as amazing. Someone who had been packing stadiums and handling the attention with a maturity and grace that was striking for a 20-year-old. Steve Johnson, speaking on the Nothing Major podcast, said straight out that she was one of the hottest tickets in women's tennis right now without being anywhere near the top 10 in the rankings. He called the crowd dynamic against Gauff, where a 2-time Grand Slam champion did not have the crowd on her side, simply not normal. 2 weeks after Dubai concluded, Navratilova sat down with WTA.com ahead of Indian Wells and Miami. When Eala's name came up in the context of the Sunshine Swing, she did not hesitate. She called her crafty. She said the lefty variety was real and effective. She identified the serve as the area requiring the most development, a bigger delivery, a heavier kick, more pace, and said Eala needed to believe in herself and hold her ground physically as she builds her game at this level. Coming from Navratilova, whose own serve was one of the most technically advanced in the history of the women's game, that particular critique carried a specific weight. It was not dismissal. It was the kind of detailed, specific assessment that gets reserved for players a legend genuinely believes can go much further. On February 23, 2026, 4 days after losing to Gauff, Eala rose 16 spots in the WTA rankings to world number 31, a new career high. She is now seeded 32nd heading into Indian Wells. 1 year ago, she was ranked outside the top 100. The climb has been relentless, and it has happened alongside a phenomenon that no ranking number can fully capture. Navratilova saw something at the Australian Open in January that she could not explain through conventional tennis metrics. She saw it again in the data coming out of Dubai in February, and when she spoke on March 2nd, she was not simply commenting on a promising young player. She was trying to make sense of something center court had not seen quite like this before, and neither had she. If this breakdown gave you context you have not seen packaged this way anywhere else, subscribe to the channel. Every video here takes the story the highlights miss and builds it into something worth your time. And in tennis right now, the most interesting stories are almost never the ones the scoreboard tells you first.